would also be things like we believe, and I think all of NAPFA believes, that you separate advice from product distribution and product manufacturing. And I'd ask them point blank, does your broker or your advisor, does the firm that he or she works at, do they manufacture product? Do they distribute product? Because none of us here do that. And I think that's a very big differentiator. We always tell our clients to separate advice from product manufacturing, product distribution. So that would be on my checklist as well. And I think the last thing that would be on the checklist is, because some people wear dual hats, would be who owns you? Are you owned by the people who work at the firm? Or are you owned by some big subsidiary? Are you a subsidiary of some big firm that does those other things?
This last question isn't so much about how you run your firms, but because you are have major firms in the industry, I'm wondering, what difference does all this make? Do you think that the existence of fiduciary financial planning firms makes a difference? Is there a larger purpose than just your firm?
Yeah, I mean, okay, so when there's a problem, the first thing both sides want to do is determine what standard should apply to resolve the dispute. So rules and regulations, the vast majority of people, if drunk driving were not illegal, the vast majority of people would not drive drunk, just because it's inherently dangerous. The fact that it's illegal does dissuade some people from engaging in that bad behavior. But the thing that the law against drunk driving does more than anything else is it gives us as a society a way to deal with drunk drivers.
Is this too soon for a beer joke?
Okay. So regulation in general, that's what it's about, right? It's not so much imposing restrictions on people that are going to do the right thing in the first place. There's a little bit of a dissuasion element to its existence, but it gives us as a society a way to deal with people that don't do the right thing. So this fiduciary standard is very important, because the only reason you don't need to be subject to a fiduciary standard in the investment advice world is because you want to do something that's not in the client's best interest. Because if you're always acting in the client's best interest, being required to do so is not a burden. It's like putting a law out there that says we have to brush our teeth every day. Big freaking deal. We brush our teeth every day. There's no burden there at all.
So collectively, are we making a difference?
Well, yeah, we're making a difference.
By existing.
Yes, exactly. I mean, somebody said earlier that people will vote for their feet and their wallets, and I agree with that. It's going to be a slow process, and regulation BS is going to set that back a lot. It's going to be a much slower process. But people will go where they are served well. And when you're not putting the client's interests first, and you're acting upon that problem, it will show up, and it will show up in the marketplace. But it's a very slow, painful process that the public should not have to go through. The public should not need a freaking glossary to be protected. And our regulators are letting down the American public in a big way.
So there's two people in the room, Dan and Ron in the back, who write about this all the time. And throughout my career, I've always read their material, and they've always harped on the same thing over and over again. And Dan's exactly right. I think that's the issue. But I think that there is one other thing that we're missing that has been fantastic for the fiduciary standard, and that is NAPFA. And not just because we're a group of like-minded individuals, but because a while back, NAPFA made a decision that because we're so small, we're not going to be able to go out there and convince everyone the importance of being a fiduciary. So they went to the press. And the press has done the job for us. When I started in this business, every prospect that came in the door, I had to explain to them what a fiduciary was and why we're different, and it was like pushing a rock uphill. And now virtually everybody that comes in the door already understands what we are and how we're different, and that's why they're there as opposed to the brokerage firm down the road. And I give that credit primarily to the press and NAPFA pushing that message to the press and getting the word out there. It's a slow slog. There's a lot of people who don't know what a fiduciary is, but they know basically what a fiduciary means, even if they don't know the word. And I give a lot of credit to NAPFA and the press for that.
It's okay. No. I mean, the only thing that I was going to add is I think from a standpoint there is that we're still going to be a niche. It's going to be a long slog. We're never going to have the money of the wirehouses. And I actually think it's a marketing advantage. And I think not that long ago, the NAPFA board was reviewing if the fiduciary rule went through to say how are we going to get members, how are we going to differentiate ourselves on an ongoing basis, and I don't think that's going to be an issue for a while.
So a last question. I'm wondering how each of you see yourselves in your role as advisors and as founders of large firms. It seems to me if you were just a young person looking for, gee, I feel entrepreneurial, I'd like to have a business, and you look at this business and you look at that business, our business looks really good. It's a good business. So our one reason you could be in our business is it's a good business. It could also be that you like operating in a way that's fair dealing with your customer. It could also be, I tend towards servant leadership, which at some point migrates over into being a professional. And by professional, I mean you have expertise that your client doesn't, and you're in a privileged relationship of intimacy, and therefore you have more responsibility and more authority. I think in our industry, you can wear any of those hats. We probably, on different days, feel differently about each one. But I'm wondering where each of you are.
I'm on the back nine. I'm not sure what your question was, but I'm on the back nine.
Okay.
Well, my kids are 22 and 20, and apparently I did something wrong because it doesn't look that good to them. They have no interest whatsoever in financial planning. My daughter did go into another helping profession, though, physical therapy. My son, we don't know what the hell he's doing at this point, but that's a different issue. Yeah, it's a fantastic way to make a living, and it's so much easier and it's so much better when the client is the center of everything, and you're willing to be held accountable for serving their interests first. It's if you are not acting in a fiduciary capacity at all times because of your employment, I don't think you're the devil. I mean, when I switched to fee only and got rid of NASD regulation at the time, right? It wasn't that I suddenly became smarter or more ethical. I was just as dumb as I am now. What I did is I got rid of one completely dysfunctional pain-in-the-ass regulator for one slightly less dysfunctional pain-in-the-ass regulator. But the one that wanted me to be held to a fiduciary standard, which just made sense. That's what clients want, even if they can't articulate it, they don't use the term as we mentioned. So it's a fantastic, fantastic way to make a living, especially from a financial planning perspective. It's just a continual set of new puzzles to solve for people. It's awesome.
So where am I at? We're a relatively small firm in a relatively small industry that's part of a very large industry, and I have no delusions that we're making a difference as a firm, but I'm okay with that. As long as we're making a difference in our clients' lives and in our staff's lives, I'm good with it, and as long as there's organizations out there that are promoting the fiduciary standard, then we would just want to help out, and that's it.
Well, I'd like to thank the panel members, not only for your good comments today, but for what you've done for the industry, taking us to where we're real players in the whole financial services industry. Thanks.
Thank you.
Any questions?
Yeah, we got about 5 minutes.
Okay.
This is more of a comment than a question. I think it kind of speaks to what you were talking about, Paula. When it comes to fiduciary, I've had over the years a number of people ask me the question, are you a fiduciary? And I answer, yes, but I like to follow up with, do you know what a fiduciary is? And very often they'll say, no, but my CPA told me to ask, or my so-and-so told me to ask, and then I just explain what it means, and they're very happy with that. But I get a kick out of it when they have no idea, but they want to know if I'm that anyway.
Nice. In the back?
Dan, about 10 years ago, I asked you a question, and you gave me a
I remember that. That was great.
pessimistic answer. I'm going to ask you again.
Oh, God.
How long until you think you can become a true profession bound by the fiduciary standard?
Financial planning,
Yes.
specifically?
Yes.
I hope to see it in my lifetime. I'm 51.
More optimistic than before.
I'm more pessimistic now than I was 6 months ago because of regulation BS. I think that's going to set things back a little bit. But there's a couple things that make me feel like we will get there. A friend of mine, retired, some of you may know him, named Dick Bodra. He once said, "They're rich, but we're right." And the whole history of mankind, and the United States in particular, right usually wins in the end. That's the voting with the feet element, marketplace. And the other is the demands just for what we actually do is just going to grow and grow and grow. It's too stressful. It's too complex. People want financial planning delivered to them as fiduciaries, whether they can, like I said, articulate that or not. We will get there eventually, but I don't see it happening anytime soon.
The only thing I'll add to is I do think the universities, just at the start of really getting in there, but until like the accounting departments and the finance departments really, develop the financial planning programs, I think that would be really the start of it becoming a true profession when they start having, more and more of the majors in it, and not just some of these schools that we know like Texas Tech and Virginia Tech.
Well, and they need to do it the way Ron does his program, which is actual financial planning. Because on a lot of campuses where my kids' friends have gone, financial planning in the minds of the students is whatever the exhibitors and the recruiters say it is. And the people that are coming and putting money in for sponsorships on campus and doing these programs are the big brokerage firms and the insurance companies. And that's why a lot of them don't want to go into financial planning, because they think it's going to be, I'm going to have to sell insurance to all my friends and my parents' friends. So thank you, Ron.
What system do your advisors use to track time when they work on client bill hour?
I don't know. I have to ask my bookkeeping firm. I'm not sure. I could get it for you. I don't really know the time.
Do you offer a time-based or hourly-based arrangement to clients for discretionary investment management?
No, we do. We'd use the time more for some of our retail, like not retail, some more of our tax clients. So some of our business management clients, not generally for our investment management clients. It's more for the complex things where it's hard. Giving a fixed fee is hard to estimate. So for some of the more complicated clients, we just work hourly. But it's also helpful to see, even on the retainer clients, as to how much time you're running.
So a question, and I'm really curious what each of you would have to say around this, because one of the most bedeviling issues that I've found over time is dealing with a dual registrant, right, in a competitive situation. Because it invariably means, oh, well, I'm a fiduciary too, and that's what the client hears. Each of you, at least two of you, mentioned about looking for the security. Now, do you explain that as being a trump card? That means that even if they say they're a fiduciary, what is it that you say that whether it's a client who's had a bad experience and now they're, or it's a client that doesn't know any different? Is there something that how do you say that? And I'm curious what's worked in dealing with that, because oftentimes we don't get another chance. They're often, the sales process says, oh, well, I'm a fiduciary too, and I'm going to charge you less even though I'm showing you only part of the fees that they're going to charge.
With a skewed set of questions. Which, do you want me to be held accountable for putting your interests first all the time or only some of the time?
So that's the key difference. It's an all-the-time fiduciary, and you say that every time, and say there's a lot of people out there that are sometimes fiduciary.
Yeah, that kind of makes the point. I mean, that's where the rubber hits the road, right?
Yeah, we call it
be held accountable.
Sorry.
Go ahead.
We call it the two-hat rule, right? So I asked them, do you know when they switch hats? Do you know when they stopped giving you advice as a fiduciary and started selling you products or services? And it's impossible to know. There's no bright line as to when they take one hat off and put the other hat on. And that usually drives the point home that, they're not always a fiduciary, and we believe once a fiduciary, always a fiduciary.
It's also not a bad idea to ask that, if they ask their rep or person to just tell them what they paid in fees last year, they usually will do a lot of hem and hawing and know real answers to them, which will make them think about it pretty carefully after that.
I think there's another distinction, and it goes a little bit to Ron's question. Paula, you and at least one of your panelists continuously referred to the industry in which we work. And that grates for me a little bit, personally. Financial services is clearly an industry. Investment management perhaps is an industry. But financial planning is a profession, or at least it's a nascent profession in the process of coming into being. And I would ask those of you who see that as being true for you to be careful about language, because when you talk about being a member of a profession, then that gets at that gut idea of being a fiduciary. And when you talk about being a member of an industry, that gets at that gut idea of delivering product. Tom.
Can I respond to that?
Please.
I would say two things. First off, I want it to be a profession, but I believe that in order for it to be a profession, you need enabling legislation that recognizes it as a profession and has protected terms. I can't call myself a doctor. I can, and anyone in this room and anyone outside on the street can call themselves a financial planner. So as much as I'd like it to be a profession, I recognize that it's not. The second thing I would say is not all professionals are fiduciaries. Doctors take an oath to do no harm. It doesn't say they need to do what's in the best interest. And I just had a terrible experience with my mother-in-law's doctor who upsold us on a hearing aid and had no qualms about it. And you never would do that if you were a fiduciary. So I get that profession's more important than industry, but profession does not equate to fiduciary.
Agreed. And not to make it too much of a two-way conversation, but your point about until we are appropriately regulated as a true profession, arguably, we don't have the right to call ourselves a true profession. That said, the idea of living and breathing what it means to be a fiduciary, which we do, and you all especially so, and articulately so. But the flip side of that is to become active in the state legislatures, to become active in Washington in protecting the title, the phrase financial planner, and in moving and taking those steps that are the prerequisites towards the appropriate regulation of financial planning as a true profession.
Fair.
Hear, hear.